right. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we're going to jump into our first talk of the night. Nerd Night's return speaker, Danny Tallon, is a high school science teacher and community theater actor who just so happens to be a super fan of Tolkien. If you don't believe him, his license plate reads Norolim, which means giddy up in Elvish. And he ended his best man speech with an Elvish blessing that brought an awe to the audience. So he believes that language and literature are vitally important for our culture, and he loves digging into works of fiction to see what are lying underneath. When he's not overanalyzing every book he reads, he's an avid tabletop gamer, RPG game master, and movie watcher. Round of applause for Danny Tallon. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
It's all good? All right. Wonderful news.
All right.
All right. So advance it with the up.
Down, confusingly. Cool. Wonderful.
Hi. Welcome. Hi. Welcome, everybody, to Nerd Night. It's good to be back. For y'all who have not seen me, last time I gave a talk about Tom Bombadil, a very specific character in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Tonight, my talk is about on Tolkien's canon, or how I learned to stop worrying and be okay with the concept of fan fiction. I've gone on quite a journey as an individual, and I'm hoping to share that with you all. So, importantly, this is going to be kind of a thesis statement. This is an anti-gatekeeping talk, okay? There is an insane amount of nerd baggage, but also general cultural baggage, but in this case, nerd baggage surrounding Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, Tolkien, that kind of thing, right? Real quick, show of hands, who here has, watched the movies, The Lord of the Rings, or read anything, knows about it? Okay, that's what I thought. Good. We're in good hands here, then. Basically, I aim to untangle it, kind of demystify a little bit of it here. Essentially, at the end of this talk, you will all gain a +5 defense bonus plus advantage when a sweaty guy starts yelling at you online. Okay? Now, to do that, I'll give you a brief tour of Tolkien's work. We're going to talk about the concept of Tolkien's canon and how it's messy. We'll do a little quick audience quiz there, a little brief aside on adaptations and fan fiction. And then we'll have a conclusion and questions. But before we get to our conclusion and our questions, I will, of course, have a joke conclusion. As you're all aware, a joke is better when you know it's coming in advance. So, hi, who am I? My name's Danny Tallon. I have been a Lord of the Rings fan for a long time, but I haven't never reached my current level of fandom until very, very recently. As a kid, I watched this epic movie, The Hobbit, Ralph Bakshi. I tried to read the books as a teenager. I watched the movies, but I was like, hey, you know what? I was just trying to read the books to get to the cool fight scenes I saw in the movies, so I never really read it. And I actually finally read the damn books at the age of 24, and that is when I entered my mad lad phase in regards to Tolkien. There's a lot of academic work on this guy, Tolkien. He was himself an academic, but the big kind of calling card for what the kind of levels I went to, I joined this thing exploring the Lord of the Rings from the Mythgard Institute, run by a guy named Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor. It is a weekly online class. I've been stepping through line by line through the Lord of the Rings for 8 years. Weekly. So, if you're wondering how far they've gotten in 8 years of weekly line-by-line discussion, this is book 1. They are here. They are still in Moria. Gandalf has not yet died. Spoilers. All right. So, as I've gone through my own personal journey, I've learned a whole lot about Tolkien, of course, about the world, about the writing process, but also I've learned about the discourse surrounding Lord of the Rings, surrounding Middle-earth, surrounding Tolkien. And I'm hoping to share some of that with you and bring you along on a similar journey. So, Who is Tolkien? Why do I care? All right. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. He wrote The Hobbit in 1932 and Lord of the Rings in 1954. He ended his career as a professor of Anglo-Saxon languages at Oxford. He was in the linguistics department. And he was actually a combat veteran in World War I. He started writing in 1916 in the literal trenches of the Somme, a bad place to be. And he started writing something called The Cottage of Lost Play, The Book of Lost Tales. And later on, when he was a professor, he wrote the immortal words, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And this work, obviously, Lord of the Rings, is huge, and it's influenced nearly every single work of fantasy in the years since. It kind of kickstarted a whole genre. He's influenced all sorts of people, right? The current best-selling author, Brandon Sanderson. There's going to be a jump scare. Sorry, it was relevant. Oh, Jesus, okay. But also, we have George R.R. Martin has been influenced by Lord of the Rings quite substantially. He said, well, what if I wrote a book about Aragorn's tax policy? That's what he said. And that's how he started Game of Thrones. But there's this author, Terry Pratchett, who had a wonderful thing to say about Tolkien, and it is this. J.R.R. Tolkien has become a sort of mountain appearing in all subsequent fantasy in the way that Mount Fuji appears so often in Japanese prints. Sometimes it's big and up close, sometimes it's a shape on the horizon, sometimes it's not there at all, which means that the artist either has made a deliberate decision against the mountain, which is interesting in itself, or is in fact standing on Mount Fuji. So, Tolkien. We'll do a quick couple polls here. I already asked this first question. Who here has watched the movies? Everyone raised their hand, right? Pretty much, yeah, pretty much everyone in the whole, all right, great. All right, who here has read the book, The Hobbit? Look at that, oh my God, this is great. What a great crowd. All right, who here has read the books, The Lord of the Rings? Okay, John, so many hands going, this is awesome, this is great. Okay, who here knows what a Silmaril is? Raise your hand if you know what a Silmaril is, okay? All right, good, good. Who here has actually read the Silmarillion on the page? Okay, excellent, we got our 2 people there. Fantastic, 3 people, fantastic. So, that's a pretty quickly diminishing poll there. So to go a quick recap of everything Tolkien ever wrote about Middle-earth. First off, you have what I would consider his academic works, right? He has here's one of them. It's a translation of Beowulf. That's not related to Middle-earth. 2 others not related to Middle-earth. We have Farmer Giles of Ham. That is a novella. That's a short story he wrote. Then we have the novella called Leaf by Niggle is the name of one of his novellas. It's actually quite good. It's not at all related to Lord of the Rings. And then we finally get to the Lord of the Rings with The Hobbit, right? That was the first one. After that, of course, comes the Fellowship, 2 Towers, Return of the King. What's after that? Silmarillion, exactly, the Silmarillion. And one unknown one, not many people know, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil is also in the world, right? So that's everything Tolkien. Well, I mean, I guess you have the other works, right? You have Unfinished Tales. You have also Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, Fall of Gondolin. Those are also in there. And then, of course, you have kind of scientific treatise on Middle-earth, people of Middle-earth, the nature of Middle-earth. And the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, those are kind of his scientific kind of answers to things. And then, of course, you have the 10-volume History of Middle-earth, which, of course, is Book of Lost Tales Part 1 and 2, Shaping of Middle-earth, The Lost Road and Other Writings, Treason of Isengard, War of the Ring, Lays of Beleriand, you can't forget that one, Morgoth's Ring, The War of the Jewels, The Return of the Shadow, and Sauron Defeated, and some sheet music. That is everything Tolkien wrote about Middle-earth. It's quite a lot, as you can imagine. And so, to kind of keep going, we have to define canon, all right? Canon, this is Harold Bloom, a guy who writes, a critic recently passed away, who writes about the Western canon. Canon traditionally means an authoritative list of works declared valid or official by a recognized authority. In some senses, that recognized authority is just whoever is speaking. In this case, Harold Bloom, right? He defined, these are the books that are good for teaching. Then you have the New Testament canon. That's a very specific one, deciding which early Christian texts counted as part of the Bible. Then you have A weird one is authors like H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard. A lot of times, Robert E. Howard wrote Conan the Barbarian, and a lot of people after he died wrote a bunch of books under their own names, and so canonizing them means saying which ones did they literally write and which ones are written by phony authors. All right. So, the work is big for Tolkien. If we want to start defining what a canon is, we have to kind of keep in mind the scope of things here. He started writing it in the literal trenches of World War I in 1916 with the Book of Lost Tales, and he wrote The Fall of Gondolin. And then he spent the next 60 years of his entire life writing in this one fictional world. More than twice as long as I've been alive, he was writing about this one world and building it. So, what that means is he was constantly revising, editing, and rethinking ideas. So we have a lot of unsolved questions in the canon, a ton of contradictions that take place in all those works, right? Just as a couple examples, not going to read the whole thing. Do elves have beards? We literally have no idea if elves have beards or not. Also, there's stuff like, Galadriel. Was she a rebel who defied the Noldor in the Silmarillion? Or was she a noble who was betrayed by the Noldor? When did the Blue Wizards arrive? Here's a very interesting one. The orc problem. Are orcs corrupted elves and therefore, redeemable? Or are they evil made corporal, right? That is something that tortured Tolkien to the end of his days. He was never able to come up with a reason why you can just kill a bunch of people without any thought. So, keep on going. The question is, we have all these contradictions in the text, right? Who gets to be the one to decide? Who is that authoritative voice? A lot of times, when people are arguing on the internet, people try to cite canon to win their arguments. And a lot of times, works published in his lifetime seems the most logical, right? If you're like, okay, what is canon in Tolkien? I'll just say everything published in his lifetime, right? Perfect, let's do that. If we say works published in his lifetime, first off, we are giving publishers the final say in what's canon, but also, let's go over what we lose if we say that. If you say works published in his lifetime, you lose the entire 10 volumes of the history of Middle-earth, so you lose that. You lose the scientific treatise. You also lose all of these other large-scale stories in the Elder Days. And unfortunately, you also miss the Silmarillion. That was not published in his life. That came afterward when his son compiled it. So you're left with The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and some sheet music as well. So it's not a lot there, actually. Not actually a lot there. And this kind of brings me to the big main thesis here, is that there is no objective Tolkien canon. Even if you go by works published in his lifetime, even if you say, okay, other things he's said throughout, there's so many contradictions in the text, so many revisions, so many old versions of everything he said, it is almost impossible to make any sweeping claim about Middle-earth without picking one version, interpreting a bunch of open questions, and making claims that aren't strictly supported by the text. Okay? So, that brings us to our little thing, canon or adaptation. I was kind of bring home this point that there kind of is no canon, and everybody falls prey to coming up with stuff, which is fine. And warning, this will be quite upsetting for all of you Lord of the Rings fans, okay? I will break some hearts tonight. So, what do hobbits wear on their feet? Opens it out to the crowd. Nothing, right? Yeah, nothing, right? They don't wear shoes. Yeah. Great. This is a painting by Tolkien himself of Bilbo Baggins in the Eagle's Eyrie in The Hobbit. I'm going to zoom in here. He's wearing boots. Oh my God. Next question. What meals do hobbits eat? Can anyone name all of them? 11sies. Breakfast, second breakfast, 11sies, yeah. Supper. Yep, afternoon tea. Luncheon, dinner. Yeah, there's like 7 of them, right? Yeah, this wonderful little thing. Here's everything Tolkien has to say about Hobbit meals. They eat 6 meals a day when they can get them. That's it. There's no list of official meals they eat. That was invented by Peter Jackson. It's really good, though. And here's probably the most upsetting one of all. What do hobbits call themselves? Just, hobbits, presumably, right? Call themselves hobbits. I'm a hobbit, you're a hobbit, we're all hobbits. Yeah, you know? Small folk? Okay, yeah, that's the Rohirrim call them small folk, actually. That's kind of fun. You did nail that one. So, The Lord of the Rings is actually a frame story. In the introduction to the Fellowship, Professor Tolkien talks about how he found this book written by Bilbo Baggins and he translated it out of a language called Westron. The Westron word for hobbits that the hobbits would use for themselves is not hobbit, it's kuduk. Plural kudugin. This hurts. I hate this fact. I choose to ignore it at every single opportunity I get. And basically, another jump scare there. These are phenomenal adaptation choices. Hobbits not wearing shoes, eating 7 square meals a day that are all listed, and calling themselves hobbits is really good. So that's what I choose to apply to the world, and everyone should do that as well. And so we're kind of already making that leap into making our own stuff up. All right. So, when answering any kind of fan question, for instance, about how hobbits lived, about how the greater world of Tolkien, he was far from a prescriptivist, and he responded to a lot of it in the vein of an academic. All right? So rather than making a bold claim when responding to fan letters, he would say, "Oh, hi, thank you, young child who wrote to me. If we read Aragorn's speech, it would seem that your theory is supported by the evidence in the text." Right? And that's how he would do it. He would not make any sweeping claims to fans, unlike some authors. Boo! So, he invited interpretation, and that brings us to fanfic. Any freaks out there? Yeah? Okay, we got a couple. Good. Oh, one more in the back. Wonderful. For all the rest of you who've never visited. Oh, sorry. Apologies. That was the joke. That was the joke slide there. I just made fun of a bunch of people. Any freaks out there who've seen Archive of Our Own in your life? Yeah! Fantastic. We got more people in the back. All right. For those of y'all who have never seen this website, Archive of Our Own, you're in for a wild ride. Buckle up. There's a whole bunch of different types of fan fiction, okay? And all of it is coming out of a place of genuine love for the source material. For instance, you have an alternate universe where Harry Potter enters the Lord of the Rings universe, or Aragorn goes to high school. You have a fix-it fic that undoes tragic events. For instance, Boromir gets therapy. Coffee shop AU, everyone's a barista, no one dies, right? You can just have that happen in a bar in Minas Tirith. Mary Sue self-insert, that's where the author themselves joins the party because they're like, I wish I was on that adventure. And so they're, of course, the most beautiful person in the world. They can accomplish anything they want. And actually, in Lord of the Rings, you have a whole bunch of people writing in the history fill-in genre. For instance, we know that Minas Ithil was besieged for 3 years before falling, becoming Minas Morgul, but there actually doesn't have any details on how that happened, so someone could write a fanfic filling that in. And yes, at the very bottom we have the slash fic, the one that people mostly think of in regards to fan fiction. Boromir looked hungrily at Frodo. You're much larger than I thought. That type of fiction does exist as well. Now, let's read some titles as a class, everybody. Sparkle by Eiling Shaban. Wonderful. Boromir's Puppy. Boromir gets a puppy. You have The Starless Road about Finrod and Turgon on the road to Thangorodrim to defeat Melkor. Yeah, that's right. You also have explicit fiction, Deep is the Night, featuring some fun words you can read in there about Melkor and Sauron and all that. With a master-servant dynamic inside. It's something. So, let's do a short reading from Fanfiction, shall we? At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Sam came in. He ran to Frodo, took his left hand, and awkwardly and shyly, he stroked it gently, and then he blushed and turned away. Oh, sorry, that was actually just from the Fellowship of the Ring, page 219, many meetings. So that's just in there, in the text. And basically, everybody, all adaptations of the text in general are all fan fiction. Everything is fan fiction. Everything is expanding, interpreting, and filling in the gaps, right? Peter Jackson, the movies, the amazing trilogy of movies are awesome, but they made huge changes to the plot, themes, and characters. When you strictly look at how he handled the text, there's not a lot that he did that was very special, all right? It's nothing much to differentiate it from any one of those fanfics we saw up there, and they're still good movies. And the adaptations keep coming. Recently, War of the Rohirrim came out, an anime adaptation of a battle in Rohan. There's an upcoming Hunt for Gollum movie coming. Of course, the most money spent on any TV show was the Amazon's The Rings of Power. It's entering the board game space. They just keep coming, folks. They're going to keep rolling out, and you can either choose to be upset about it, or just be like, oh, look, it's fanfic. Yeah. So, all of these, you don't have to like them, okay? But they don't break canon, all right? That's the thing. None of these adaptations are going to break canon. When Amazon's The Rings of Power came out, I don't know if any of you saw the discussion online. You had a bunch of horrific racist people on Reddit going, oh, it's actually disrespectful to Tolkien's canon to show black people in Middle-earth. That's, Jesus, just shut up. One, shut up. Two, canon doesn't really exist in Tolkien, right? We literally don't know the color of Frodo's hair or Legolas's hair. He's a blonde elf, right? We don't know that. He had no point to describe it. There is no reason why that breaks canon at all. So, every single adaptation is just that. It makes its own decisions on canon, cuts stuff, revises stuff, inserts things. That brings us to our conclusion of this little whirlwind of thoughts here, okay? And to do this, I want to bring us around to a young J.R.R. Tolkien, about to publish his second ever novel, The Lord of the Rings. He's nervous. He's unsure if it's going to get published. He's writing to his editor, Waldman, in something called the Waldman Letter. He has this to say. Do not laugh, but once upon a time, my crest has long since fallen. I had a mind to make a body of more or less connected legend, ranging from the large and cosmogenic to the level of romantic fairy story. The larger founded on the lesser in contact with the earth, the lesser drawing splendor from the vast backcloths. The cycles should be linked to a majestic whole, and yet leave some scope for other minds and hands wielding paint and music and drama. Absurd. I really hope in the future other minds and hands continue to add on to this world that is so expansive and so vast. And that brings us to the end of our conclusion, which of course leads us to the joke conclusion. You knew it was coming. All I'm saying is, everybody, the author of this fic, explicit fic, the unabashed Dark Lord about the post-darkening of Valinor, the author who included forbidden love, hand-holding, hurt comfort, the author who included foursome, eventual polyamory, angsty missionary, and explicit depictions of crafting, whose username is Melkor's Big Tits, is the only real Tolkien fan. Do I have any questions, folks? Yeah, what's up?
How many times did you give this presentation?
None. Yeah, it's the first time. Yep. Thank you very much. Yes, hi. Have I written any fanfic about Lord of the Rings? Remember that example I gave about Minas Ithil and Minas Morgul and how there's 3 years we don't know about? Yeah.
You did a really great job of explaining why we shouldn't be so hung up on canon, but I'm curious, even in the context of Lord of the Rings or just any story, why is canon important? What is the value of canon?
Yeah, what is the value of canon in this or any story? Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? Like, ultimately, does authorial intent change your view of a story? I think it can, right? Like, if you read Starship Troopers, the guy, like, it's people read it as a satire. He kind of meant it to be a serious, like, military drama, right? So, like, the author's intent can kind of make some sense there. I think canon is useful in a couple ways. In, like, one, you're trying to unpick, did this guy actually write this? But two, it can give you a bit of a ground covering to discuss things. It's particularly tricky with Tolkien. But yeah, we're all engaging in fiction anyways, so yeah. I don't know. Yeah, in the back.
I was wondering if you have any thoughts on comic book fandom, like, what or not fandom, canon. Like, what is the official canon of Superman? Do you feel like it has any relation to the way that Lord of the Rings canon?
Yeah, I think it does. So you're asking about like superhero canon, which is famously extremely messy. Yeah, I think it's a great question. And honestly, it's a great thing to add. Like, okay, so like you can read the first Superman comic, right? Action Comics #1, and that'll tell you something about Superman. But so much has happened since there. Suddenly he has, like, in some versions he has, like, crystal powers. He can trap you in a crystal for eternity. Some versions he's flown into the sun, you know. But ultimately it's all things that have been rewritten, added upon for, at this point, over 100 years. They're all official, exactly. And so as fans, you have to just, as with every adaptation, pick, choose what you want, and not get mad at someone when they think something else is more official than yours. Yeah. Hi.
Outside the Peter Jackson films and your own, what are your favorite adaptations?
Favorite adaptations? Easy. It is a... So what is my favorite adaptation outside of my own fanfic and Peter Jackson? Yeah. There is a version of Lord of the Rings filmed by the Soviet Union. It is free on YouTube with no subtitles. It is so low budget. Gollum is just like a guy wearing green tin foil and just kind of doing this, right? You can't understand any of it. And they do have Tom Bombadil. He is present in the Soviet Union adaptation. Great work. Great work, Gorbachev. Yeah, what's up?
I have a friend that rejects anything that's fan fiction outright. Yeah. What would you say I should say to her to convince her that, hey, it's all fan fiction. It's cool.
Yeah, how do you get someone who just rejects it outright? Yeah, great question. I would probably point to the people, one, who write good fill-in stories, not mine, who write good fill-in stories about, okay, there's literally like there's thousands of years unaccounted for in Middle Earth, and so you can just fill stuff in there, right? I would point to, I would point to the fact that, anyone can just interpret things, and I would say, just look at how many times he rewrote everything. At one point, you know Aragorn Strider? Everyone loves Aragorn, yeah? At one point, he was a hobbit named Trotter who wore wooden shoes. So, like, he rewrote things so vastly and so completely that, like, you really can't say anything is canon, I think. I just basically say that. I just kind of repeat that bit. Nothing is canon, exactly. There's really no official canon. Things are contradicted from the base books, Lord of the Rings, in later stuff. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Danny Tallon. That was amazing.